Welcome to Strategy Talk, where the authors and editors discuss news and events with a splash of history. Our host today is Dan Masterson. Joining him is Jim Dunnigan, well-known military author and the Dean of Wargaming. Also, joining today's show is columnist and author retired Colonel Austin Bay.
Welcome, Austin, Jim. Thought we'd talk a little bit about Israel's northern border. There's been things going on up there, not as much as what's going on, obviously, in the Gaza Strip. But one of the things that happened recently and has been going on is bombing is going on up there. The U.S. has made strikes. And interestingly enough, Jim, Russia made a strike up north in northern Syria. So what is the U.S. and Russia striking there in Syria?
Well, the Americans are going after ISIL, the terrorists, and the Russians are too. There's really no other target for them to go after in Syria. And we've been basically taking our turns, going after what is available.
Right. So, Austin, haven't there been some strikes, though, against Iranian-backed militias or groups there in Syria that have been causing problems both in Syria and Iraq?
Well, what I've read, and in all open source, is that there have been counterstrikes by the U.S., and it seems that most of them have been drone, might be artillery as well, on some of the positions that they were hit by rocket fire from the various Iranian proxies. I have read, too, that within the last 2 weeks, the Israelis have struck some Iranian targets. It was described in the report I read as a logistics base that is located inside Syria. And for all I know, it would be supporting the proxies in Syria and possibly Hezbollah in Lebanon. I'm not sure where they were, but it said that the strikes were Israelis and the targets were quote unquote Iranian.
So this would be sort of preempting, trying to take away their capabilities of arming up north, correct?
Well, ultimately, yes, but the thing is that I've read some of these reports of the absolutely jaw-dropping rocket stockages and stockpiles that Hezbollah has in Lebanon. But yes, that's what it would be.
Yeah. So, Jim, another thing that was hit in Syria was the airport by the Israelis. Now, I guess have the Israelis taken credit for that or not?
They usually don't, but the airport is where the Iranians fly in additional rockets, especially the guided ones. They are also in the past flew in guidance kits to add to unguided rockets to turn them into guided rockets. So they're still, putting up a stockpile there. The Iranians are more prudent than Hamas and the Palestinians are. They want to hedge their bets. They don't want to use what they got, and they want to have a lot unless they have to. I mean, if they do use it, they want to use a lot of it to have an impact. Hamas has been, except for what they did in southern Israel, not having much impact. And indeed, Hamas basically blew its capabilities in southern Israel because the Israelis struck back. And, of course, now they're trying to basically pry Hamas out of Gaza.
Wow. So you mentioned, Austin, that there's just an unholy amount of projectiles and rockets and missiles and like that have been accumulated by Hezbollah. Oh, has that all come from Iran, or where has that come from?
For the most part, yes. If it's not come directly from Iran, Iran has helped finance it. I mean, there are other weapon sources that Hezbollah might tap. But for all I know, some of the material could have come from Afghanistan, what Taliban captured after the great American skedaddle debacle. But again, the reports on this, Dan, I think they're credible. I believe really Israel is the number one resource for information on it. And look at the amount of time that Hezbollah has had to build up those stockpiles. The rocket war was in 2006. There have been a couple of little flare-ups ever since, but there hasn't been what I'll quote unquote call a serious response from Israel to attack Hezbollah stockpiles and Hezbollah positions in the last 7 to 8 years. I mean, there've been strikes, counterstrikes, but if they do have 100,000 rockets, and that's one of the figures I've seen 110,000.
Yeah, I've seen even 150, which
yes, I saw that too. I saw that figure too, Dan. I was getting there, but the thing is, 100,000 is an impressive number, and it's the logic behind it is that they're going to swamp Iron Dome type defenses with just too many incoming projectiles. If they can position them and then shoot them in a huge volley, and that's the idea behind it. Israel has to take the higher numbers seriously as the threat that it poses to northern Israel, to Galilee, really all the way down halfway across the country. And some of the longer range systems can actually shoot all the way north to south over Israel. So it is a threat in place that Israel has to account for.
Yeah, Jim, some of those missiles are ballistic, right?
Yes, and the Israelis don't have much defenses. What they're worried about now is the threat that these rockets impose on the Israeli ports. They had their port traffic, and now they are basically within range of a lot of these rockets. Now, what the Israelis also want to avoid is having to go in on the ground. They've done this in the past, but that gets Israelis killed. It's more expensive, but it does sort of solve the problem, at some cost to the Israelis in terms of troops and material. But they've done that before, and they can do it again. Basically, Iran and Israel are playing chicken. Who's going to basically go for broke? The Iranians believe that they're in the better position because they're just building up, as Austin pointed out, larger and larger stockpiles of rockets. And at one point, the Israelis are going to have to realize that, well, no, we cannot afford to get hit by this many rockets, and they're going on the ground. They've done this in the past, but like I say, it's costly in terms of Israeli troops killed and Israeli tanks and what have you. Suffering losses. But right now they're basically fighting in Gaza. They're not overcommitted. I mean, they can send troops up to the north as well, but they don't want to be that committed, to dealing with this problem. They'd rather take care of the Gaza first, which they're trying to do. They're sending in tanks as well as the Air Force to basically wipe out what's left of Hamas. And there's still a lot of down there. But after that, they can go north, and they can basically deal with the problems in Lebanon. They've left Lebanon alone. I mean, basically, Lebanon is at the mercy of Hezbollah. Lebanon has really ceased to function as a separate, as a nation. They've basically got so many different hostile entities within their borders. That they no longer, control their own country, and the government has basically collapsed. There's chaos up there, and the Lebanese really don't want to get any more violence going in their country than there already is. So it's a tricky situation. Again, the Israelis could go up, but they don't want to. Like I said, it cost them troops and material, which they would rather avoid. But they
Mhm.
took such heavy losses in the south, against Hamas, that there's basically Netanyahu said we're at war. Now, some Israelis officials have said, well, maybe we don't have to, but it's basically leaning more in the direction that it's all out war, and the Israelis are going to have to basically take their losses and eliminate the threats on both the south in Gaza and in the north in southern Lebanon.
Now, one of the things, Austin, that I read was that U.S. intelligence has picked up that the Wagner Group is preparing to provide air defense capability to Hezbollah. Did you see that?
Yeah, I read that too, Dan. The type of air. Was my take on it when I read the story. The Iranian advisors that Hezbollah has, and really the operational advisors from Iranian, the Al Quds, their special forces. They've got people who are capable of handling more advanced air defense systems. And as a matter of fact, Al Quds is responsible for Houthi rocket fire. They're responsible for the ballistic missiles. They probably are, and with Hezbollah as well. So that's one of those stories that opens eyes because heck, it's Wagner and it's Russian, and are we moving towards another superpower, regional power confrontation? But I think the Hezbollah's already got the technical assets for a air defense. It's a porous one. It would be a porous one even with Wagner advisors there. It'd get taken down very, very rapidly by Israeli suppression of the enemy air defenses, SIAD, and but it's an exciting political dimension that generates headlines on it. I'm not sure that Wagner would be adding significant technical capabilities to Hezbollah that aren't already there.
Okay. So what do you think, Jim, about the Wagner Group getting involved?
Well, the Wagner Group is not what it used to be. And when people refer to the Wagner Group, it's basically just a couple of the surviving Russians in that group. They're acting as mercenaries for the Russian government and sending in portable air defense missiles, which can hurt the Israelis if they're not careful. And again, the Israelis want to avoid full-scale war in the north because right now they're concentrating on suppressing what's left of Hamas in Gaza. And that's basically tying up a lot of their resources, and they'd rather not overcommit themselves.
Austin, let's drift back up to Syria. One of the things that I saw was interesting is a story out of France and one out of Germany. In France, they issued an arrest warrant for Assad, and then in Germany, there's a trial on 4 of the Syrian generals. Have you read much about that, or do you know much about those two?
I saw the report that Assad is wanted as an international war criminal. Well, he is an international war criminal. How are you going to arrest him, detain him, and bring him, presumably, I guess, to The Hague? That's a big problem, Dan. I had not read that about the Germans, and I'm curious as to who's involved in that courtroom battle. It'd be interesting to know if it's some German peace group or what.
Yeah, it's curious, Jim, why these things have happened now. um, because, at any time over the last 10 years, you could have, well, or even longer, you could have accused Assad of war crimes, right?
Well, yes, but the problem is that the Germans are always on the lookout for these terrorists, as they call them, and they basically need a target that they can go after, and the basically the primarily the targets have kept their heads down, but now they're basically popping up and leaving themselves vulnerable to attack or prosecution, as the case may be.
Right. So, the Hezbollah has really caused a lot of problems there in Lebanon. Jim, you mentioned that they have been elected into the whatever their parliament is there, right?
Yes, and it's not much of a functional parliament. What Hezbollah did was, get, how should I put it, get some political power in order to nullify the Lebanese government. I mean, the government has been a mess for years, and now it's completely paralyzed because you've got, as you point out, you've got the Hezbollah, taking part in the government, and their main reason for taking part in the government is to prevent the government from doing anything against whatever they're trying to do surreptitiously. So it's really just a diversion tactic. Nobody can really gain an upper hand right now. That's the problem, especially in Lebanon. Lebanon's been a failed state for over a decade, and things aren't getting any better.
Right.
Dan, if I could point out something, that even the problems that Lebanon was experiencing in the 1980s and 1990s, one of the analyses, is one I favored, I think it's the one that's happened, was that it would break down into confessional cantons, is the way it was expressed. In other words, armed religious cantons, and it was comparing that to Switzerland, but except it would be a constant war instead of neutrality and peace. And you see that with Hezbollah, which is a Shiite organization, Amal militia, which is still around. That's Druze, and then various Sunni groups, and then the remaining Christians too. And they're armed, but Hezbollah dominates it, and the reason it dominates it is Iranian money and Iranian weapons.
Yeah, one of the things is in the last Lebanese war, their economy got hit really hard. And from what I understand, Jim, the Lebanese don't want another conflict with Israel, but they're sort of, Hezbollah is going to decide what Hezbollah decides, right?
Yes, the Lebanese people want peace so they can rebuild their country, but at the same time, they're very anti-Israeli. And if something does start, they will basically ignore their own fundamental needs and go to war. It's just the way things are up there. So, Lebanon has already paid the price of getting involved in this mess. And, there's no prospect of it ending anytime soon so that Lebanon can get back on its feet. It's really a mess. And it's a shame because, Lebanon was once the pride of the Eastern Mediterranean. It was a multi-ethnic, multi-religious, state. Everybody got along, but now some of the factions are radicalized and they're not getting along and they're just making more of a mess.
Yeah, I know. I was surprised. I really hadn't followed what was going on in Lebanon much other than, short clips and like that. But what I was surprised is what you just mentioned is them being anti-Israeli. I actually follow an author on X that he is really anti-Israeli, and it surprised me because I thought he wouldn't come across that way. Austin, what is the reason for the hatred for Israel up in Lebanon?
Well, I think there's not one reason. There are a bunch of different reasons that coalesce into either hatred or distrust of the Israelis. The Maronite Christians and Greek Orthodox felt let down by the Israelis. They're the upper class Sunnis in Beirut resent the fact all the Palestinians that came up there, and they think the Palestinian diaspora is one of the reasons that Lebanon started to fall apart. As Jim was saying about what Beirut's status was, it was the Paris of the Eastern Mediterranean as far as the as far as Arabs and were concerned, and Beirut was the banking center for the Arab world. Not now. Banking centers in the UAE or moved elsewhere, and they tied at some point that the destruction of Lebanon to the presence of Israel, and some of that is unfair to the Israelis, but it's been propagandized to them, and it's also, no matter what you think of Hezbollah or the various other armed militias, Lebanese militias in there. It's when the war starts between Hezbollah and Israel, it's Israeli aircraft and artillery doing the bulk of the damage. One other thing, too, there is some self-protection in being anti-Israeli, which is maybe my neighbor who hates me, when he's not hating the Israelis, will not get into a shootout this time if I repeat the same propaganda he repeats. So that's part of it, Dan, and that's why you have to step back 3 or 4 paces and look at the context of the statements. Really, the biggest factor right now in the disintegration of Lebanon is Iran, by far, and Iranian money, Iranian intrigues, and arming and training Hezbollah.
So, Jim, basically, Israel has ended up with 2 non-existent states on their northern border, correct?
Yeah. And then they have another non-existent state in the south with Hamas, which is being pounded regularly. Like I say, that's their priority right now, because Hamas is closer and has been more aggressive, as they demonstrated in October. And the Israeli population, it's a democracy, and they say, get rid of the biggest threat first. And that means the Israelis are continuing to battle what's left of Hamas down in Gaza. But yeah, there's always been the problem up in Lebanon. Lebanon, like I said, it's a failed state, but it basically tried to stay out of any fighting with Israel because Israel obviously is stronger. In the past, Israel has threatened to reduce Lebanon to rubble, which they could do. I mean, there'd still be something left, and people, would be anti-Israel, but they're already anti-Israel. I mean, how much anti-Israel can you be to be any more of a problem than you are now? But the Lebanese are, as Austin pointed out, are angry because they basically become the staging area for everybody else's wars, especially Iran. So they don't like, the situation they're put in, but there they are. They got dragged into it bit by bit, and Beirut is no longer the the gem of the Eastern Mediterranean. They wish it were that way again, but it's going to take a while, if ever, that they're going to regain that status.
Yeah, one of the things I read, Austin, is that Syria's facing a serious food crisis, and funding has run out for humanitarian efforts in Syria. What do you know about that?
all I know is what I've read about from World Food Program, UN, and then all comments about grain shortages in general generated by the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and that's been alleviated somewhat by Ukraine operating its own shipping corridor through the western end of the Black Sea, but it's Syria, Africa, North Africa, Southwest Asia was dependent on Russian and Ukrainian grain, and that's been evident for excuse me for the last 30 years, and it's been disrupted. But the other thing is that Syria is utterly fragmented. It's there are small wars going on within the greater war of disintegration in Syria, and it's hard as heck to get food aid into chaotic places like that. The food gets stolen by the armed factions, and the other thing, there's the donor fatigue going on. The Turks are tired of having so many Syrian refugees, and they've done, in my opinion, a good job, given the fact that they had initially a surge of about 2 million, and then suddenly a more or less permanent population somewhere between 3 and 4 million, either living in camps in Turkey and some of it distributed throughout the rest of the country. But they're tired of it, and that's not necessarily a direct factor in the current food shortage, Dan, but it's something that at a political level becomes more. It makes it more and more difficult for food aid when the donor nations are saying we're tired of putting up with it.
So, Jim, it's interesting that whenever we talk about things internationally, which we do all the time, that's what we do, is somehow we end up pulled back to Russia.
Russia and Iran, and they basically work hand in hand now. I mean, they're really closer than they've ever been in the past. For example, Russia has started to ship in the Su-35 fighters, modern fighter jets.
Yeah, that really surprised me when you reported on that.
Yeah, now they're coming in slowly, but pilots are being trained, and they're quite serious. Of course, at the same time, Ukraine is getting F-16s, and their pilots are already in training and very enthusiastic about their new fighter aircraft. But that's dealing with a different enemy, different war. So you've got these multiple wars. You've also got a problem with about 1 million of these Sunni refugees ended up in Lebanon, and that radically changed the ethnic and religious composition of Lebanon, which has caused problems because you're talking about Arab Sunnis, and in a country that's basically got a lot of Shia.
Yeah, Austin, the whole area is sort of like a bad game of pickup sticks where you're going to pull on something and it's going to affect something else, correct?
Well, I like your metaphor of 52 pickup. That card game where you throw the cards out. It's basically the same thing. There are or were factions within Syria when Arab Spring first broke out in Syria that could have formed, let's call it a moderate, more democratic government if you had gotten rid of the Assads, or someone had gotten rid of the Assads. They didn't. They hung on. How did they hang on? In part, Iran, in part because they controlled the guns, still did, controlled enough of the army and enough of the security forces, and had enough of the money. But now, you've got Syrian, Kurdish self-defense groups that are aligned somewhat with the PKK, or maybe they're not. They've got U.S. support, but the Turks say they're just part of the Kurdistan Workers' Party. You've got those Turkmen villages, ethnic Turks that are scattered near the Turkish border with both Iraq and Syria. And you have these enclaves, armed enclaves throughout Syria, where the government doesn't have any control, and a larger force of the Assads don't have control. And in some of these places, this is where Iran wants to take advantage of the lack of control, and they're using it. I'm making a guess here that some of their logistics facilities are in areas that really Iranian proxies control, or if not Iranian special forces. And then you have the U.S. and Russia in there. There's still a small U.S. force. Some of it centered around one of the oil producing.
Which apparently got funding again, so that U.S. force will remain there in Syria.
And there's still some support that comes out of northern Iraq. No, it's a disintegrated state. A chaos state is another term that crops up every once in a while, and it's not really a state. It's, as you said, pickup sticks. Reach in, and the thing is, like pickup sticks is probably better than the card game, is that they have pointed ends, and you can stick your hand in it and get stuck. Now, that's one of the problems. Not only with Syria, Lebanon's a little bit like it. Matter of fact, Syria has aspects of having become a big Lebanon. That's the same kind of social and cultural and ethnic chaos, and religious chaos as well. Remember, the Assads are Alawites, and they're classified as Shias, but they're really Islamic heresy. They're Muslim heretics, and that's been one of the reasons that they hold together so tightly, because they fear if they lose power, they'll be slaughtered. They might be, but then they've been doing a lot of the slaughtering themselves for the last, 50 years about. So,
yeah.
Another advantage the Assads have is they control the coastal area. That's basically their homeland, and that gives them better access to the entire world. Shipping goes through there and what have you. And as long as they hold on to that, they have a major asset. And they want to hold on to it because it's basically all they got left. I mean, the place has been, as Austin pointed out, has been devastated. And they're getting sick and tired of being everybody else's place to, conduct a war.
Yeah.
I've been called down for mispronouncing it several times. Latakia, but Latakia is what I was told. That's the major port, and the Russians have a facility there.
Yeah, they have a naval base, as it were. I think they contracted it. They're legally there, but they don't base a lot of ships there. It's basically their support for their Mediterranean fleet, and they sent some of them up into the Black Sea now because of the war that's going on up there.
Well, we'll wrap it up there for today. I'll be looking forward to talking to you gentlemen in the future. Have a good weekend.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
Bye.